and I am delighted to be here with you. This is an opportunity for me and for the congregation. Are all of you hearing me well? Okay, all right. So I'm going to give you a little history, probably a big history, of coming out or our landing in Donaldson, Indiana. And you know that before any event happens, sometimes good, sometimes bad, anything that really comes to reality takes a lot of planning, preparation, discernment. And this is the case too of the Poor Handmaids coming to Donaldson, Indiana. So you might have questions like, well, what brought you out this direction? How did you find that place? From where did you come from? Well, I'm here to answer those questions. So you see, I need to preface this presentation by a bit of history. Already in 1851, our foundress, St. Katharina, was graced by our loving God, along with 4 like-minded women, to join or to form a congregation. And her goal was to minister to the sick, the needy, the elderly, and children. But this was a turbulent time in Germany at this time. The Franco-Prussian War was going on, and during that expanse of time, more than 1 million Germans migrated to different countries, and a great majority of them came to the United States. Well, the vast resettlement of these folks was in the Midwest, and a lot of them settled in Indiana. Why? Well, partially because of climate, partially because of the land formation and things like that. A good many of them were people of the soil, and so they wanted to continue that. Interestingly, a great number of these immigrants settled in Fort Wayne, Indiana, or in that area. And Bishop Lures at that time, who was himself an immigrant as a child, his parents came over here. He was very concerned about the German settlers. So in addition to building a beautiful cathedral and a children's home, he was concerned especially about his German parishioners. So, as life would have it, he had friends in Germany that knew the Poor Handmaids. And at that time, Father Woodtire, who was our chaplain, had a special relationship with Father Lures, or Bishop Lures. And through the combination of the two, he was introduced to the Poor Handmaids. So in Germany, our congregation was widely known as sisters who had good training in nursing and in schooling. And so as early as 1865, negotiations began between Bishop Lures, and there he is up there, and our sister Katharina, who at that time was known as Mother Mary. So as I mentioned earlier, things seldom happen overnight. A lot of discernment and planning had to happen first. And initially, Mother Mary was a bit hesitant to send sisters to this foreign country. So, however, the Bishop Bloom from the Diocese of Limburg, where our sisters were originated, was very eager to have Mother send sisters to America. So, despite her feelings, she finally wrote to the bishop, and she says, "Seeing that your lordship desires that our sisters be sent to America, to me it is the holy will of God, to which I gladly submit, surrendering my own judgment." She still had question marks about it, but who wouldn't have question marks, right? So at that time, in the congregation's history, which wasn't very old at that time, there were 297 professed sisters, sisters that were no longer in training, professed. So Mother Mary asked for volunteers. And out of those 297 sisters that were available, do you think anybody volunteered? Actually, 245 of the 297 volunteered. Of course, she could not send that many. So, of the great number, 8 were chosen. I think we have a photo of that up there, maybe. Anyway, they left Germany through France, Le Havre, on the 14th of August in 1868. And, well, Katharina bid them a great farewell, and she understood with her whole heart that faith which finds the expression in love is all that matters. Faith has to be lived in love and in action. And she was pushing that. She was agreeing to that. So these 8 sisters arrived in New York 10 days later, on August the 24th. They were met by 2 Franciscan sisters who gave them accommodations for the night. And the father that was supposed to meet them there was a little bit delayed. That's kind of usual, isn't it? So the father didn't show up for 2 more days.
Wow.
But the sisters stayed there with the Franciscans. And then Father Bramer arrived on the 30th of August. And the sisters knew they had not yet reached their destination. So on Sunday afternoon, accompanied by Father Bramer, they continued their journey and finally arrived in Fort Wayne. So on that same day, they still hadn't reached their destination because they were to go to a little village called Hessen Castle. How many of you know that village? It's outside of Fort Wayne, but not very far, maybe 10, 15 miles. And the sisters rode there on a farm wagon, sitting on bales of hay and their suitcases. And they arrived in Hessen Castle. their first mission in the United States. Well, they were welcomed royally and then shown to their one-story home. And after having a special prayer time, they had a wonderful supper at one of the farmers' residences they had prepared. And the sisters were very much happy and grateful, but they also were a little bit amused because they wrote back to Mother Mary that we had a wonderful reception. And while we were having dinner, one of the girls stood by and waved a big branch over the food so that the little preachers wouldn't sit down. Okay. Well, you can imagine that the sisters were tired from their journey, and they went to bed, enjoyed their first night's sleep, and then, very shortly, the sisters began their ministry. And their first ministry was there in Hessen Castle, take care of the church. They did the altar linens, and one of the sisters was a good organist, so she played the organ for the church services. But the sisters eventually busied themselves. They knew this was not their work. They had to move beyond. And they did a lot of home nursing and eventually teaching in the school there. In 1869, our dear mother, Katharina, Mother Mary, sent over another 7 sisters. So now there were 15 poor handmaids. And these sisters addressed the rapid growth of what was happening. The Bishop Lours, bought up the old hotel that was standing empty in Fort Wayne. And he gave it to the sisters, kind of dreaming that it would become their central house, their provincial house. Well, he also wanted them to take in patients. And what happened was, they did open their door to patients, but the number of patients grew so rapidly that they couldn't even keep up with it. So the 7 sisters that came were a big, big help. And by that movement of the 7 coming, there was a feeling of the first 8 that 2 of them preferred to return to Germany. So it was, coming and going, not a one-directional movement. But even the sisters increased in number, so did the patients. So in 1873, 9 more sisters were sent over. So we had a good representation of poor handmaids here in the United States. But a number of the young folks around began seeing what was happening. And several young women came, wanted to join the congregation. So a young lady by the name of Miss Becker was the first one who joined the congregation. Well, the number of patients in the hospital increased. And while some of these sisters went out every day to do home nursing, when they would come back in the evening to rest, they would find a patient in their bed. What could they do? Well, they didn't say, "Get out of my bed." The sisters just left the patients there and slept in a chair for the night, or wherever else they could find a place. So, by that time, with all of these extra sisters coming, the community had expanded to Chicago and other areas, and in the early 1800s, the bishops of, one bishop of Chicago asked for the sisters to take over the German Catholic children's home in Chicago. It was called Angel Garden Orphanage on Devon and Ridge Avenues. And of course, 1800, then in America, follows the Civil War, and the children's home started maybe with a couple hundred kids. But by the time the Civil War ended, there were thousands. I was stationed there in the early and middle 60s, early 70s. At that time, we had about 2,000 children in the home. There were something like 36 cottages, and each cottage had 32 plus children. Well, it doesn't exist today anymore because the government made rules about children being in institutions, but it's still serving a good purpose. Another community bought it, and they serve people that need special care. Lots of mental cases and issues like that. So, at this time, in the 1800s, one of our sisters was working in a hospital in Chicago, and she heard, of course, gossip and people talking, but she heard about a place in northern Indiana, namely Hotel Cecilia on Lake Gilbraith. And a picture postcard described the hotel as a delightful rest resort, pure air, spring water, shady groves, and beautiful country surroundings, bathing, boating, fishing, and other recreations. Come and bring your old clothes and have some solid comfort at the lake and farm. All foods are fresh from the farm. Well, this sister was Sister Catherine. So what did she do? She got on the train and she went to Fort Wayne to tell Mother about this wonderful place because the hospital was so overcrowded with patients, there was no room for the sisters anymore. So Mother was looking for a place. Initially, she thought just for rest and recreation. And Sister Catherine went and told her about this place. So before Sister Catherine went back to Chicago, it was decided that Mother Tabitha, that was her name, should go and have a look at this place. So she rounded up Sister Seraphia and a laywoman by the name of Casilda Youngman. And the four of them, with Sister Catherine, went to the hotel on the 18th of February to look and see for themselves. So, after seeing the lovely grounds and surroundings, it was decided that the congregation would purchase the property. The owner was a gentleman by the name of Mr. Glunz, Glunz. It's not a familiar name in this area, is it?
No.
I don't think so. But anyway, the sisters were very grateful. And Mr. Glunz was so happy to talk with the sisters. So he made a deal. And the deal comprised over 65 acres of land, cleared land, but part of it was forested. The deal also comprised the Lake Gilbraith. It's a good lake. It's 90-some feet deep. And it's a large lake. It's not a puddle. There were people that often came out there to fish because the lake itself contained many fish. Then, in addition to all that he had agreed to give them, he added several hundred chickens and a hotel with 43 furnished rooms. The deal included 2 pianos, 2 automobiles, horses, cows, and the farm implements. And another appealing feature was that on the property there was a small little chapel, a beautiful little chapel. And this wonderful setup was sold to our Reverend Mother for $33,000. In this day, we would say that's a steal, because prices are climbing higher and higher. So, of course, eventually, Mother let the bishop know that she had purchased land, or would purchase, and she wanted it only for a relaxation place. But the bishop said to her, "Oh, I would like to look at that. I'd like to see it too." So he came out one day and he saw the land with another priest who went around and blessed the buildings while the bishop was having a look around. And then he said to Mother, "This place would be ideal for your mother house." Well, that's really the stamp that brought us out to Donaldson, Indiana. It is a beautiful place. And if you've never had an opportunity to visit us out there, just come and see for yourself. It's still a beautiful place. So at the time Mother bought the property, it was called Retreat St. Amalia, in memory of their recently deceased Mother General. Mother Amalia, initially, our Retreat St. Amalia was supposed to be that place of rest and what have you. So it did become the Mother House. In mid-June, Mother Tabitha returned to the retreat house, and along with some of the sisters. And at that time, this Father Paulinus that had done that blessing while the bishop was there, presented Mother with an altar stone. Now, I'm not sure if all of you know that this is a special stone that's put in the altar. It's a stone that contains relics of saints, and it stays in the altar for all the while that the altar exists. So the stone was put in the altar, and then Bishop Allarding, who was now the new bishop in Fort Wayne, came that afternoon and had the first Holy Mass in the Mother House little chapel. The big chapel was not built at that time. So in 1918, the First World War began, we know that, but another pressure was upon Mother to get the Mother House built quickly, because at that time she was being asked again and again, how many beds do you have available for military people that need attention? Well, there weren't enough beds, so the sisters had to give up their beds, and Mother knew that they had to migrate, so to speak, get out of the way. So the building plans for the Mother House began, and the architect at that time was Herman Gall. I'm not sure where he was situated, where he came from, but recently when we talked about the event that we're going to celebrate this year of the Mother House's 100 years, a nephew of Herman Gall came to the Mother House to visit us. And he was from the Chicago area. Well, the story is told that when they started at the Mother House, Herman Gall could not find sufficient laborers in this area. So he brought in a lot of workers from Chicago who were really acquainted and capable of building. So on the 23rd of September in 1919, the digging of the foundation began. Already at that time, there were 43 sisters living in the old hotel that Mother had bought from Mr. Glenn's. So the congregation bought a large truck, I guess it was more like an omnibus, to accommodate the sisters coming, and Mr. Dominski was the chauffeur. Running out of juice. And he was kind of a clever fellow. And in his omnibus, he put a little sign and a little cup that said, "A donation, please, 10 cents. So what he did with the 10 cents, I don't know. So the workers worked very, very hard. And imagine, they started in September of 1919. And the cornerstone was laid already on June the 10th, 1920. Would things like that happen today? So electrical lighting was obtained from Tyner, Indiana, here, through the efforts of the Plymouth Light and Power Company at the cost of $6,100. Then the telephone equipment cost $291.77. But also a silo was built on the farm because, you know, we have, and the sisters wanted to keep the cattle and the chickens and what have you that they had bought from Mr. Glenn's. They built a large silo for the farm cattle. And this silo cost them $600. But everything worked out all well. Often, Mr. Dominski had to go to the train station to meet the sisters that were coming from Fort Wayne and from other directions. And at that time, Little Donaldson did have a train station. When I entered, I came on the train, and I could get off the train right in Donaldson, Indiana. It's not there anymore, but it was there. It also had a number of little stores and shops. Today, nothing like that exists. But anyway, the building continued, and it was ready in no time by 1922. So how did it get cleaned up? You know, builders don't exactly do a clean job. Well, they can't. That's not their job. But the sisters that were teaching in Southern Illinois at that time came home, probably out of curiosity. But before they went back to do their teaching job, they made a little brigade of cleaners. And they went through the whole new building and they cleaned it up. A beautiful, beautiful new building. Isn't that a picture? Well, then, in August of 1922, the first Sunday Mass was celebrated, but the chapel wasn't quite ready, so it was celebrated in the auditorium. And during the week, the sisters had a small chapel on the 3rd floor where they had their daily prayers. And later that same year, at Christmas time, Sister Genevieve's father donated the statues of the Annunciation that are above our altar. And the sisters, are not the sisters, but the auxiliary folks that worked with our sisters in the hospital in Chicago donated all the altars. So little by little, everything was coming together. Finally, the large front doors were installed on the 2nd of February, 1923. We're getting closer and closer. Some of the interior work of the mother house still had to continue. Some of the floors were not finished. Most of the flooring in our mother house is that kind of mosaic, what do you call it? Terrazzo flooring. And it has held up wonderfully. And today, it looks like it's brand new, and it's been there 100 years. I think many people could agree with me here. You've seen it. So, the original altars were built in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and the stained glass windows came to us through the Prado Studios. But they got most of their stained glass windows from Germany, and all of ours came from Bremen, Germany. In our chapel, there are 72 stained windows, some big, some small. The original chapel organ had a variety of pipes, large, small, but the total of pipes in the original organ were 1,166 gilded pipes. Now, we just recently replaced that organ. And it has, again, every number of pipes that number the thousands. I can't tell you how many.
21 something, I think.
25. 2,500.
Over
Well-
2,000, well over 2,000.
And keep your eyes open. There are going to be a number of organ concerts in the near future, so you're all welcome. Well, on May 24th, 1923, all the chapel preparations were complete, and the dedication was set for the same day, May 24th. That day, the Blessed Sacrament was carried in procession around the property and placed in the tabernacle. And on that day, the mayor of Plymouth, sent his driver with a car to be available for anybody that would need transportation. So the good mayor's son stayed all day so that if anyone had to leave for an emergency or needed transportation, he was prepared to accommodate them. Wasn't that great?
Yes.
Now, for more than 100 years, the sisters have reached out in ministry to the sick, in hospitals, in children's homes, schools, retreat places, and what have you. Actually, this listing tells us that in those 100 years, we served in 431 missions, 431 establishments. And we also worked in a total of 15 states. We had primarily Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin. Then we branched out to Iowa, to Rhode Island, to Minnesota, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Arizona, Georgia, Texas, and California. So we've been stretched. Anyway, today we also serve in foreign countries. Some of our sisters, a good number of them, are still in Mexico. We have a sister who just came back from Kenya. She had been there, I think, for some 20 years. And one of our sisters is still in Brazil. But our presence there has established the community in these areas. We have sisters, natives now, in all of those places, and we are grateful for that. Some of our sisters also responded to the call of the church to serve in refugee camps in Thailand, in Cambodia, and in places like that. So the call is still there, but the number is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. I think the total number of Poor Handmaids now is in the 60s, about 68, something like that. That is too less to reach out to all the needs that are out there. So we need your prayers and we need your help. Put the seed into the soul, into the heart, into the mind of young people. They get too much on television and their computers and their phones to distract them. But God is still God, and He wants us to grow. And I think you do too, but not this way. Thank you. Do you have any questions or something I could share with you?
Sister will be here to sign her book.
if you would like to purchase a copy and have it signed just specially for you. So, and if you have, please stop and get information if you want it on some of the events. Yes, sir.
Well, you said there's only 60 sisters right now. Do you have a number, what the peak was, and how many there was back?
The peak. He would like to know if you know what the largest number of sisters there were at the peak.
Well, that is a good question. And at one time, I don't know the number absolutely, but we were close to 500 in the American province. And that was a good number for us. Yes.
Sister, overall, the largest number internationally overall, wasn't it over 2,000?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's interesting even today that the poorest countries have the most sisters. I was fortunate to visit Kenya in 2019, and they had at that time 28 young women in formation. Young women interested in entering the congregation. They only began in the mid-2000, about 2009, and today they have almost more sisters than we do.
Can you address the associate program that you offer for is it lay people that can, okay, can you address that and how that works?
Mm-hmm. Well, our associate program is very, very, what shall I say, an adjunct to the congregation. We can no longer do everything. So the associate women and men join us, and they go through a little formation program. And in the end, what they learn are our values. And we believe that our 4 core values flow from joyful service. So these associate people are kind of representative of the Poor Handmaids in whatever ministry they are doing. But they keep these core values at heart. And often they come back to us and spend a day of quiet, a day of retreat, or just a day of, friendship, whatever. And the core values are central to that, especially to the needy and the underdeserved. But remembering that they need to be open to the Spirit, there need to be a community of communion, which means we don't leave anybody out. Everybody belongs to God's group, to God's graced family. And simplicity, simple, respect for everyone. So our associates are a kind of an adjunct community, and we love them all. We feel like they belong to us.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You know that we partnered with the Marian University to keep our college running, and it's doing very well. And the reason we wanted to keep it going is because we serve many underserved people, people that wouldn't be able to get a college education otherwise. And we know that in today's world, education is foundational to a good job.
Amen.
I heard an amen. I can say that again. Okay, any more questions?
Sister, not a question, but could you tell us a little bit about what you established in Kenya and how that came about?
Your work in Kenya?
Your work in Kenya?
Well, Are you tired of listening? I worked
And
in,
the age you went, that's so important.
I don't remember.
Judy does, she remembers how old you were.
I was working in the general leadership for 12 years. And during that time, we had regular meetings with our staff. And one of the sisters said, you know, actually she was the financial sister, took care of the finances, and she said, we have been supporting someone in Africa for years, and we don't even know if he exists.
Oh.
And I said, well, what is his name and who, where? And she said, well, his name is Brother somebody. And she found the name for me eventually, and he was a Franciscan brother. Well, I wrote to the headquarters. I found the community that he was a member of, and I wrote to the headquarters, and I asked if this brother was authentic, if he was for real. And the master, whatever they called him, provincial, wrote back and said, oh yes, he's been in Kenya for a number of years, but he's doing a lot of work by himself. He would love to have someone to assist him. He's running a big girls' school, and he needs help. Well, from this little conversation, an invitation went out to all the sisters if anyone would volunteer to work in Africa. Well, we didn't get 245 volunteers like Mother did, but we did get 2. And 2 sisters, one was from America and the other one was from India. So the 2 sisters went to Kenya and they did a good job there. They were working with Brother, I'm so sorry I can't remember his name, but they worked with Brother, and he had a big girls' school, but he also had a dispensary. And luckily, one of these sisters was a nurse, and so she worked in the dispensary, and the other sister worked in the school. And eventually, the sisters were saying, well, why do we just have 2 sisters there? Why couldn't we make a foundation? Well, it didn't take much trouble because we just had talked to the bishop and he said, I can't wait for you to come. Come. So we made a foundation in Kenya in 1999, I think it was. Yes, 1999. And it grew from there. Now, we have a school that has more than 600 students. We have a children's home, street children, kids that otherwise lived on the street. Really poor, poor, poor kids. You can't imagine how they were existing. And we also have a hospital and a couple outlying stations, not big hospitals, but it's clinics where patients can come for their immediate needs. And then in Tika, which is the great pineapple country, you know, the people that grow all the pineapples, that's right there, and the sisters are working there also, but not growing pineapples. So that's the way we began in Kenya, and I was privileged to work in Kenya for about 12 years.
What did you do there?
What did I do there?
Everything. Remember when you.
Well, I started, actually, I started at the school that brother was running. But I wasn't there very long, and the pastor from the neighboring parish had opened a school, but he was leaving. He was from Poland, and he wanted to go back to his own country, and he wanted someone to take over the school. So I was asked to do that. I started the school with 46 pupils. But the reality was, Father had almost more co-workers than pupils, because people would come to Father and say, Father, I need a job. Father, I'm not having any work, I don't have any finances, and he would hire them all for school. So anyway, all right, so the school went on and grew. I started a food program in the school because I realized that even these kids, many of them walked maybe 8 or 10 kilometers, what would that be, about 5 miles, come to school without breakfast. And at that time, most Kenyan families ate 1 meal a day. And that was usually in the middle part of the evening. So the kids would come to school without breakfast, and then at lunchtime they had nothing. So I wrote a grant to the Hilton Foundation here in the States to get money to start a food program in the school. And they were generous because the exchange rate at that time was about 100 shillings to $1. So with $7,000 from the Hilton Foundation, I had a good beginning. But I did make a big mistake. I didn't realize that in the small village where I was located, I could not buy wholesale commodities. So when I needed to buy a 100-pound bag of grain, most of their food is corn and wheat, or beans really. No wheat, corn and beans. I'd have to go to a bigger town. Well, we didn't have a vehicle. So from my place up to the stage where I could get a vehicle, I had to walk about 3 miles. But to make it a little shortcut, I would go through an open market area the day after the open market. And what did I find there? Dozens, I kid you not, dozens of kids digging through the rubbish, eating trash. One day I came along, there was a boy with a kind of a metal rod, and he's digging through the rubbish. And he came up with a wrinkled, old, dirty cabbage leaf. And he looked at it like a piece of gold. Rubbed it on one side of his trouser and rubbed it on the other. His trouser was about as dirty as the cabbage leaf. But kids saw that and they came running, and I thought, oh my gosh, there's going to be a fight. But this kid stood there with his dirty cabbage leaf, and he tore it up, one little piece, one. Everybody got a bite until there was no cabbage leaf left. It was so impressive to me. Well, because I knew a little Kiswahili, their language, and they knew a little English too, we got to be friends, we shared. And one day, when I was going up to buy commodities, a whole gang of them came running toward me. Sister, sister. And they said everything in English so I wouldn't be mistaken. We want to go to school. I thought, how wonderful. But almost, what, I promised them I would do something, but I did not know what I would do. I would have to get them off of the street. I would have to get them cleaned up. I would have to, some of them needed medical care. Some of them, they all needed clean clothes, and none of them had shoes or anything like that. Well, I called our headquarters in Germany, and I knew that we did not have money to build at that time. So I asked if I could rent a place. And Sister Hermana was the general superior at that time, and she said, "Oh, that's a great idea. See what you can do." So I had two young men working in school with me. One was kind of a caretaker of the grounds, and the other one was a repairman. And I said, "Hey, could you guys help me find something to rent?" So they were my contacts. They went around all over the place looking for places. One day, Mr. Markey came back and he said, "We found a place. It's big. It's just an abandoned storehouse, but it would be good." Okay. Well, we got in touch with the owner, and the owner said, "Oh, the street kids? I can't rent to you. I'll lose all my patrons." Well, by patrons, he meant usually these people, usually from another part of the country, might have a big store of some kind. He was a store manager in home repairs and things like that. He said, "I can't rent to you, I'll lose all my patrons." Well, patrons are little houses that they rent out, and what they do is, it's only primarily a house for sleeping, because the leopards run around at night, and it's not safe to be sleeping outside. So they sleep in these little houses, but they have their accommodations, like their toilet and their bathing cubicle, what they all share. The whole group shares the same thing. They cook on a little charcoal burner, and that's about how they live. So this gentleman said to me, "I can't rent to you. They'll have to share their accommodations with all of you, and that won't work." Well, that went on a half a dozen times. Nobody wanted to rent with those dirty kids. Well, finally, the guys came back and said, "We found something. Nobody will bother us." I thought, this must be a gift from heaven. So I said, "Is it very far away? Can I see it?" He said, "Oh, it's just one street over from the market area," which was not far. So I locked up the school office, and I went to see this wonderful place. Well, from the outside, it looked very, very good. But when he opened the door, I was in an abandoned slaughterhouse. I took 2 steps inside and I said, "This place is a disaster. Nobody could live here." And he looked at me and he said, "We'll clean it up. Sister, we'll clean it up." I was still doubtful, but Mr. Markey was a good guy, and I said, "Okay." Well, we had to pay 1,000 shillings a month for this dump. But in American dollars, that's $10 or 100 maybe. Anyway, they shoveled out all kinds of trash and rubbish and what have you. And he came one day and said, "Do you have a little money?" And I said, "Like a little, how much?" And he said, "Well, if you have a little money, we could paint, because the walls inside were painted red, 6 feet up."
Yeah.
And we painted, looked pretty good. Came again and said, "Well, we have no light. Do you have a little more money? We could put in solar panels." So we bought solar panels, and he put in solar panels. We did not advertise that we were opening this for the street boys, but the day we were ready to open, I thought we were ready, he said to me, "Not yet, sister, we don't have water." So I went to the officials, the water corporation people, and I told them what I was trying to do, and he said, "Oh, we'll help you." He gave us one tap, but that was better than nothing. So I went to town, and I bought about 40 plastic buckets. And when the kids came, finally, each kid got a plastic bucket. They could fill their bucket at the water spigot, take it out to the bathing cubicle and get clean and fresh, and wash their clothes, and it worked like a charm. And in no time, we had so many kids that I could not accommodate them all. I had to turn some away. But the good chief, he's like the mayor, he came one day and said, "Sister, do you have plans for the future?" I said, "Well, we're getting an overflow of children, and I need to build something. I would like to buy a piece of land." And he looked at me and he said, "You want to buy land? Well, how else do I get it?" He said, "I can help you." Said, "There's government land around that I'll show you." So one day he came with his car, and he wanted to show me a piece of land, but I took my Mr. Markey with me because I didn't know what I was getting into. And we didn't drive very far, but he pulled into this area where there was brush and trash and what have you. And he said, "This is all vacant." And I was ready to say, "I don't think we can use it." Mr. Markey gave me a good push, and he said, "Sister, take it. We'll clean it up." Well, they did. And we ended up with a good 20 acres. Wow. And this is where we built our St. Joseph Caring Place. And now we have boys going through there year after year after year. We try to put them all through education, grammar school, high school, and university or college. And some of the boys would say, "No, no more school, sister, no more school." Well, then we put them through technical college. And they turn out well too. One of the boys now has his own butcher shop. Another one had a little woodworking shop. He was doing very well, but till one night, someone stole all of his machinery and what have you. Well, but then he got a job in Nairobi, and he became acquainted with the Railway Institute, and now he's studying there. He should finish this year. He'll have a job with the railroad. So that was my great achievement.
And what do they call Sister Germaine, what do the boys call you?
That's a nasty question. She asked, "What do the boys call you?" Well, I still hear from the boys. They couldn't remember Germaine, so all the while I was in Africa, I was called Maria. But even the bishop didn't know that. But the boys never called me Sister Maria. I was always called Sister Mom.
I love that.
And when I hear from them still, "Dear Sister Mom." It's kind of ironic, but yes.
Sister Germaine, did the boys stay there overnight? They had no home to go to.
Oh, absolutely. They stayed there 365 days of the year. Unless they went out for continuing education. There's a rule in Kenya that if you go to high school, you stay in the boarding. If you go to college, you stay in the boarding. So they would come back at holiday time, but otherwise they were with us all the time. And the boys really appreciate their education. I have one of the boys who went through college. He now has a degree in dentistry. I have another boy that finished his degree. He has a degree in accounting, and he worked for a firm for about 3 years. Then he opened his own little business because he's very technical. He has what he calls now a cyber shop, and it's doing very, very well. So I think I'm using too much time, right?
Well,
Time is up.
are there any other questions? If there aren't, then sister, why don't we get you set up to sign books?
Oh, I just want to tell you a little bit about
Oh,
this.
yeah, please do.
I wrote a history of our American province, and it tells you about our 150 years of ministry here in the United States and beyond. But if you would like a copy, the print isn't too small. I don't think you'd need a magnifying glass. But anyway, they're on sale up here for $15, and I will sign it for you. We would like to give you each a medal of St. Katharina. Okay? And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, sister.